Get ready.
Hello, I am Liam Ashcroft and welcome to another episode of This is Saturn. It's AM2 month on SEGABits, so today we'll be looking at just another one of the glorious fighting games, Fighting Vipers. Now, one of the first episodes of This is Saturn that I did was based on Fighters Megamix, essentially a crossover of Virtua Fighter 2 and Fighting Vipers. So it may seem weird that I've now decided to tackle Vipers alone, seeing as it was basically already covered in that review. Well, for one, I feel my reviews have progressed considerably since Megamix, and in addition, there's quite a bit of content that Megamix actually lacks compared to the original Vipers, including an entire character. More on that later though, let's jump right in with some background. Fighting Vipers was unsurprisingly a 1995 Model 2 arcade fighting game by, well, SEGA AM2. It was also unsurprisingly ported to the SEGA Saturn the following year. Sadly, the game never caught on as Virtua Fighter 2 did, and the series died, or at least it did in America. The game actually got a sequel on the Sega Model 3 board later, aptly titled Fighting Vipers 2, but more on that later. So now that's out of the way, story time! Courtesy of the woefully translated PAL manual, hyper-adrenal combatants in full body armour, battling night and day in back alley rings. Only such young urban warriors as these have earned the right to be called Vipers. Now in Armstone City, the Mayor has formally announced a fighting tournament on a grand scale, with the final bout to be held atop the staggering City Tower in the centre of the town. With City Tower as their ultimate goal, 8 young Vipers start down the path to victory, a path to which only one will see the end. Exciting stuff, I'm sure. So yes, the premise is simple, kick some ass, win a tournament. In general, Fighting Vipers plays very similarly to Virtua Fighter 2. Buttons for punches, kicks and blocking are all here. However, the game innovates with an armour mechanic. Each fighter is kitted out in full body armour, some of it more apparent than others, and focusing your blows on specific areas of the opponent will damage that section of their armour. The armour is split into 2 halves, upper and lower, and destroying it leaves the opponent more vulnerable. Destroying both halves, as I mentioned in my Fighters Megamix review, leaves them with a health bar of wet toilet paper. This aspect of combat introduces considerable tactics to battles, and it's something that I love. Another difference to Virtua Fighter are the arenas. Virtua Fighter has open stages, and if you're knocked out of the boundaries of each stage, it's a ring out. Fighting Vipers has cages, and you can use these cages to perform moves, slam opponents into them, incorporate them into combos, and even knock defeated foes straight through them. Knocking the opponent through the cage is incredibly satisfying, especially on the level set in a giant lift. As for our characters, despite what the manual says, we actually have 12, and 15 if you're being really pedantic. That's actually a rather impressive roster to say the least. So, who is this rogues gallery made up of? First up, we have Grace, a wannabe ice skating champion who was betrayed by an ex-lover or something, and decided instead to beat the shit out of people. Makes sense to me. Next is the effective Akira of the game, Barn, a Japanese bancho whose forward punch attack is broken against the AI. The manual states he has a preferred nickname, that being Genghis Barn the Third. That is both absolutely amazing and absolutely fucking hilarious. We then have Axl Rose of Guns N' Raxel, who fights with his guitar and pile drivers. He's in the tournament for promotion, surprise surprise. Of note, this guy's AI is a pain in the ass. Tokyo is the next guy, and he's surprisingly a fan service character for the ladies. Man, Sega covered all bases. He apparently used to be in a gang called Black Thunder, and that's it. His dad's a kabuki actor too apparently, but it's not like we ever see him, so next. Sandman, whose name basically means free man, since San is Japanese for free, is a large guy with a bowling ball throw of doom, an arse attack, and a motorbike, the latter of which doesn't show up in gameplay. A true shame. Anyway, he's powerful but slow. Next. Jane is, amazingly, a character in a Japanese fighting game who isn't fast but weak, and isn't there for guys to stare at and wank to. Again, Sega covering all bases. Jane tried to join the Navy, but they deemed her too tough to join. As such, she's in the tournament to knee people in the crotch, beat them down and snap their neck. Probably. We then have Picky, an annoying little shit with a skateboard he, like Raxel, fights with. He starts skating to impress some girl and somehow joins the tournament. He's also fast but weak, and he's also massively annoying. Did I mention he's annoying? Finally, we have our final character of the initial roster, Honey, or Candy as she's known in the West for some daft reason. Honey is probably the other mascot of Fighting Vipers besides Barn, and she's probably the most likely wank material for this game. She fights in a plastic custom-made dress and is in the tournament to promote her line of fashion. She achieved even greater popularity after it was discovered there was data for her in Sonic the Fighters. Yeah, a fully Sonicified version of Honey was discovered in Fighters, who then probably gained more recognition than Vipers itself, sadly. In fact, speak of the devil, as the current story arc of the official Sonic the Hedgehog comics is based on Sonic the Fighters, and has Honey as a fully fledged character. She's even in the tournament for the same reason as Honey in Vipers. Anyway, enough Sonic blabbing. Honey's fast but weak again, has an arse attack as you should have guessed, and seems to base many of her movements on cats, for some reason. There's also an entire cheat code pertaining to being able to remove her skirt, for some reason. Honey is the character I play as the most. No comments. Anywho, in terms of character balance, Fighting Vipers takes itself far less seriously than Virtua Fighter. It's nowhere near as difficult, for one. Sadly, this lack of balance also stems from the fact most of the characters don't really have any varied matchups. A ton of moves are shared between characters compared to Virtua Fighter, where each character has a clearly distinct and personal moveset. There's also the difference in game speed. Fighting Vipers is absolutely frantic compared to Virtua Fighter. No real moon jumps here. You can get knocked around like a pinball machine here, and I bloody love it. A major part of this comes from the amazing mid-air recovery mechanic you can pull off if you get knocked flying. It's satisfying to pull off successfully, and you can even use it to rocket back at foes for attacks. I also prefer the character designs to Virtua Fighter. Don't get me wrong, both are awesome, but the ridiculous over-the-top designs of the Vipers just appeal to me more. Anyways, there's also a slew of secrets in this game too, mostly characters. The final boss of the game can be unlocked in two flavours, Marla and BM, Big Marla. Marla is the snake armour wearing big bad of the game, and Big Marla is a bigger big bad of the game. Literally, he is bigger than Marla. That's it. A wee bit stronger too, yeah. Also available are the lovable Kuma-chan and Panda-chan, the soul-consuming birds of doom who I discussed previously in my Fighters Megamix review. There's also alternate costumes for Honey that are treated as separate characters for some reason. One of these costumes gives Honey a ukulele weapon, and if that's not the best idea for any fighting game character ever, I don't know what is. In spite of the ukulele attack, however, all of these characters are just alright, especially compared to the final character in the game. Over in Japan, the original arcade release of Fighting Vipers actually had some product placement, courtesy of the sheer amount of Pepsi branding everywhere. Now, as for Coke versus Pepsi, I leave no comments, except the amount of Coke vanilla cans sat next to me as I speak. In fact, I find it bizarre throughout most of the 90s, Sega promoted Coke with Sonic, yet over in Japan they stood with Pepsi. Anyway, while Pepsi branding was in the Japanese arcade game, they took it a step further with the Japanese Saturn version of Fighting Vipers, with another Daytona USA horse moment. AM2 are good at these amazing secrets, aren't they? Enter Pepsi! Yes, playable in this game is Pepsi's then mascot, the enigmatic Pepsi Man. If you don't think this is the coolest product placement in video game history, then fuck you, for you are wrong. Pepsi Man is amazing and even great fun to play as. Granted, yes, most of his moves are just a mix of a few other characters, mostly Tokyo, but he's Pepsi Man! He alone makes getting the Western versions of the game entirely pointless, and he's probably the main reason I'd still go with the Saturn version over the HD Arcade Perfect PSN NX BLA re-releases, or the Japanese PS2 re-release. Anyway, in addition to a regular arcade mode, there's also a random option to mix up the order of the fights every time you play, which is very much welcome. Training mode is also on hand, and once again it gives you OKs on moves to keep track of how many you can pull off. There's one code pertaining to training mode that lets you change Honey's name in the Japanese version to Candy a la the West. Not sure why you'd want to though. The options menu provides some handy features as with Megamix, including a gallery for viewing all the ending credits images. Key config and the like is all there, and you can unlock bonuses such as invincibility. There's actually other silly codes, including a kids mode a la Virtua Fighter Kids, except 3 times more terrifying. So yes, now all the secrets and options are out of the way, how's about the graphics? They're alright. Granted, it's difficult to make out much detail due to how jagged and bitty they are, but they get the job done alright. There's not too much texture flickering. I'll let this one slide. Soundtrack-wise, David Lacy composed the game's tracks, and again, they're alright. It's nothing too memorable, but it sets the tone with hard-rocking themes that are great to kick some 32-bit arse to. There are a few standout tracks, such as Barnes' theme and the credits. It's all really good stuff, just a bit difficult to recall off the top of my head. So, overall, Fighting Vipers. Is it something I can recommend? Absolutely, it's still one of my favourite fighting games of all time for its breakneck pace, superb character designs, rocking soundtrack and fun multiplayer, the latter as you'd expect. I cannot stress enough that if you're going to play Fighting Vipers, play the Japanese version. There is seriously little point in getting the Western releases since they're basically muted. As I mentioned, sadly Fighting Vipers never really went anywhere after this game. There was a Fighting Vipers 2 for the Sega Model 3 board, but that only saw a Dreamcast port in Japan. And Europe. And I live in Europe, hence I have a copy of the game for the Dreamcast. So... there, sorted. Fighting Vipers 2 is basically more of the same, but with new characters including a cyclist named Charlie who actually uses his bike in battle, Del Sol, a weird wrestler guy, and Kun, who is both a knockoff of Giral from Virtua Fighter and also comes across as a lackluster replacement for the mighty Pepsi Man. His name is also dangerously close to an expletive. The entire original cast is here, but with redesigns that work pretty well, though I will say that the 2D artwork for the game is absolutely abysmal. I would probably prefer Fighting Vipers 2 were it not for one huge issue: the control. Sega were absolutely boneheaded with most of their fighters on the DC, and for some insane reason you can't use the analog stick in this or Virtua Fighter 3 TV. I mean, this would be fine if the Dreamcast had a good D-pad, you know, like the Saturn pad, but the Dreamcast D-pad is bloody atrocious. Yes, you're clearly supposed to use an arcade stick, the game makes this obvious through button problems, but you can sod right off if you think I'm shelling out that kind of cash for 2 games. I might pick up a Saturn to DC controller adapter at some point, but seriously, the Dreamcast D-pad is atrocious, and the fact Sega thought it was okay for fighters is just stupid. Anyway, after that rant... yeah, go buy Fighting Vipers on the Saturn. I'm done for today, folks. See you on the next episode of This Is Saturn, where we'll be looking at an arcade racer that's a bit of a different beast to the likes of Daytona USA. Sega Touring Car Championship. See you then. Once again, a huge shout out to the ultra powerful pals of This Is Saturn at Gaming Hell, who provided a lot of research for this episode, as well as a few images. Thanks again, guys, and keep doing what you do. Our dreams are fantasies and lost